Hi everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to the Advanced Sculpting Exercise chapter. In this chapter we will turn this concept art into a full dynamic topology sculpting using Blender. From this concept art we will only use the creature and the luggage stuff because I don't want this chapter to be too long, and because of that we will not sculpt the human character. This chapter is addressed to more advanced users. I guess you can go on if you watched the previous chapters, but certainly I would recommend to practice some sculpting before going on with this chapter. The general idea of this chapter is to dive deeper into the sculpting tools and to show you what Blender really can do while creating something awesome. And since this chapter is addressed to more advanced users, I will fast forward quite a bit of the videos, but nevertheless all the important parts are still in real time. That means I will show everything you need to know slow, and all the repetitive work we will fast forward a bit. Also, I try to separate this chapter into certain videos which will focus on certain parts, but also keep in mind creating something like this is a creative process. That means not all the videos are only focusing on one thing, because while creating something like this you have new ideas over the time or you want to change something here and there. So every video contains one main topic, but also we will do some smaller things here and there. Alright, this first video here is about creating the base mesh. We will create the base mesh for the creature, the luggage, and we will also create some kind of base mesh for a human character. This you could use certainly to go on and sculpt a human character, but we will use this only as reference for the proportions, because it's really important if we are creating the saddle and the luggage stuff that a real human figure could be placed there. Okay, before we start, one last advice: don't use the same concept art as I do. Go to ArtStation or anything else, search for some creature concept art or whatever you like. And if you then create your very own sculpting, you need to solve your very own problems, and in this way you will learn much more than just copying the stuff that I will show you, especially when it comes to the creative process. When it comes to workflows and how to use the tools, certainly copy the stuff that I will show you. Alright, without further words, let's finally get started. Alright, for this exercise we will use Blender 2.79. And I also enabled this quick preferences with this dark gray color. Now up here I switch to the UV image editor, and from my external folder I drag and drop my concept art up here. So I can show you stuff on screen. Certainly if you have two monitors you can simply open this image on one monitor and on the other you can sculpt. Then down here I switch back to the outliner. I separated this window and now I have the outliner and the properties, and this with right click, header, flip to top, I flip to the top, and under all scenes I switch to visible layers. That means we only can see the objects inside on the layer we are at the moment. So that means if I add a cube here you can see the cube, but if I go to an empty layer you can see nothing. So we have a better overview about the stuff we have here. Then definitely switch to orthographic view. This is much easier to handle sculpting and all that stuff. And now let's start building our base mesh. As mentioned in the beginning, these videos are for more advanced users, so we will fast forward some parts of the creation process so this gets not too boring. When we start sculpting, we will sculpt this whole model symmetrically, and after we are done with sculpting, we can pose this model as it is here on the concept art. For creating the base mesh, I also drag and drop this concept art into my background to have a good reference. And for now, we don't care about the general scaling because after we have sculpted everything, we can scale everything down, but certainly in relationship to each other. That means the man and the creature should be in the right proportions. I press N, and for the background image I set this to front and lower the opacity. And now I simply create my base mesh using subdivided cubes. I press Ctrl 3 to add a subsurf modifier with 3 subdivisions. And now I try to imagine how long the tail would be and so on. And I certainly will create different parts like the legs, the head and so on as separate objects. And later on during the sculpting process, we will merge those objects. For now, I just switch to edit mode. And with extruding, I start to create the base mesh. So then when one part is done, I switch back to object mode, add a new object with a subsurf modifier, and then I go on. So the head I create a little bit smaller because I want the head and the jawbone to be two separate objects. So we can create an open mouth as well if you like. For the objects, you can see our center point is now down here. We can click on set origin, origin to geometry, and the same thing here. And now I duplicate this thing here and create the jawbone. Then for the legs, I also create a simple cube, add a mirror modifier in this case, and again a subsurf modifier. And now if I move it over, in this case we have to switch the mirroring axis, as you can see, onto the y-axis. So we disable x and enable y. So one little thing we can do is to rotate the whole object. Let's quickly switch to pivot point 3D cursor. With Shift C, I reset the 3D cursor into the center. Now I press R, Z, 90 degrees. So now in actual fact, when I'm looking from the front with numpad 1, I see the creature from the front, and with numpad 3, I see it from the right. So it's a little bit more easy to handle. And now let's switch back pivot point to median point. All right. Since the legs are so close together, I mean the upper leg and the lower leg, we will separate these two objects as well for now. So it will be easier for us to pose this creature. But for doing this more quickly, we can, for now, duplicate this in edit mode, and then later on we separate these objects. So as you can see, it's always important to check your model from another angle. As you can see here, the whole legs are much too wide. So let's scale this. So and also important for joining the objects later on, it's good that they are intersecting. Certainly we can edit this in sculpt mode later on as well. So now let's quickly add a toe. I simply select one face here, Shift D, make it smaller, extrude it. Yeah, and if we realize that some parts like this toe here, which is pretty far at the side, looks weird on the 3D model, we can change this and not follow the concept art. Then I left click here and add a quick cube to make this very little toe, as we can see here. So now in edit mode, I press P and by loose parts, and now all the parts are separated, as we can see, but still we have the mirror modifier enabled for the different parts. So this is perfect. All the tiny details like this hair things, the horns, the scales and so on, and the eyes, we will create a little bit later. Now let's go on with the saddle and some of the luggage parts. So again, I add a cube, add a subsurf modifier. As you can see, it's always the same workflow. Now let's create a quick saddle thing. So for some of the mats or whatever this should be, I add a cylinder. And down here in the operator panel, I would use the pulley count a bit and set the cap fill type to nothing for now. The depths could be a little bit smaller, and also the radius, if we like, we can adjust this. And now let's quickly switch to edit mode. And I select the whole loop here, and with Ctrl F, I choose grid fill. Then as you can see, this will be filled as a grid with only quads. Same thing down here. Now I can add some loops over here, and now let's rotate this and add it somewhere here. And also we can add a subsurf modifier, and now as you can see, the edges will look much better. If I add a subsurf modifier to a Engine cap fill type, you can see it looks like this. So we get a much better result for starting our sculpting. And then let's add the main bags we have here as subdivided cubes. And if I select everything and press Ctrl B in edit mode, we can add a bevel, as you can see. And in this way we can sharpen the edges a bit. If we like, we can add a loop cut. And the luggage don't have to be exactly in the center here, but certainly it will help if we leave it straight. So if we sculpt on the one side, it will automatically sculpt the other side. And later on we can move this around a bit. Up here we have another mat thing, so I duplicate this cylinder, make this smaller, something like this. Then let's duplicate the bag, Shift D. And now I add a mirror modifier, because for now I just want to have the same bags on the other side like on this side here. So as you can see right now, if I switch to edit mode, the same thing will happen on the other side. And keep in mind, these are just base meshes, so we will adjust them a lot later. And also we can add a lot of base meshes and other objects during the sculpting process, so we don't have to add everything at this moment. Just the main shapes we want to start with. Then we have these two sacks here, so you can see a subdivided cube looks like a sphere. So let's scale this a bit. And I think this is okay for the main luggage. We also have this rod here, and certainly a lot of ropes and stuff like this. But all these things we will add later, because these are tiny details. And also here I think we don't have to sculpt that much, so we will model this stuff later on. Okay, I think that's it for the luggage. All the luggage stuff I select, and for now with M move it onto the second layer. And let's separate all the objects which are in one mesh. So here, for example, I press P by loose parts, and also here P by loose parts. For now, we want to have everything separated, except the things that are mirrored using the mirror modifier. So, and the last thing we need is the man. Also the man we will quickly create with different subdivided shapes. For this I press Shift C, so my 3D cursor is back in the center. And now let's add a cube with some subdivisions. And now I just build the body with these shapes. And certainly I take care on the things that I have here already, so that the man fits into this scene. So with I inset the faces here and add this little hole, so we can add a face in here as well. But for now, let's go on with the lower body. Just a little note here, this type of base meshes we create here for this character is nice if you want to sculpt on and want to create a real sculpting out of this. But later on in another video, I will show you how to quickly add a human reference figure using the Manual Bastioni Lab, which is a free add-on that allows us to create a human character with the right proportions we can use for reference, but also for sculpting. So the last thing we need is a head. For this I select this thing here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I add a cube. And now I separate all the parts from the body, so I go into edit mode, P by loose parts, and the same thing here, P by loose parts. And now I'll select everything for the man. And as you can see, since I selected the last layer here, everything is on this layer. If this is not the thing for you, press M and move it to the third layer. Now we have separated the creature, the luggage, and the man. And this should be our base mesh to start with.